and to pray bold prayers and say, God, oh, that you would bless me indeed, despite my circumstances, despite my everyday life, despite where I have come from, despite my history, despite my qualifications, despite all these things that I think define me. Oh, that Lord, you would bless me indeed. Bless me beyond that. Bless me beyond my thinking, because my thinking is not your thinking. Let me tell you, what we think is nothing close to what God thinks of us. So I think for me, that has got to be the highest form of understanding what prayer is, because I have stopped going to God, praying and fighting those who are around me and fighting the definitions of the things that have defined me all through my life. But I have started going to God. I have started going into prayer with that level of boldness, guys. And let me tell you, I have seen the difference. Prayer doesn't have to be a place of going to fight. Prayer doesn't have to be a place of only rushing to God when things seem not to be working out. But when it becomes such a simple relationship, just a simple relationship that you have with God, where you go to him with boldness, but at the same time you go to him with this level of humility where you're saying, I have given it all up to you. And Jabez had reached a point where prayer for him was not a defense mechanism, but prayer for him was boldness. Prayer for him was approaching the King of Throne with boldness, was approaching God not as how people have defined him, but how he perceives God to be in his life. And Hey guys, welcome and welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, karibu sana. My name is Jane. Welcome to Make an Impression, a safe space where we are choosing to be authentically bold in how we live our lives, whether that is matters faith, lifestyle, or personal development. So if those are topics that interest you, please do consider hitting the subscribe button and joining this growing family. So today we are just going to have a conversation. I just wanted to talk about prayer, and the reason why I wanted to talk about prayer is because I am constantly realizing that prayer is really not just us talking to God, but it's really just a conversation between us and God. It is an exchange. It is not us taking our needs and our prayers to him, but it is also him speaking to us in the process. And unless we have reached a point where we understand prayer from that perspective, then we are always going to get stuck. We're always going to be stuck in prayer is talking to God. And if it's only one line of communication, then there's definitely something that is breaking in between. So having grown up in a Christian home and generally just in my Christian life, I understood prayer as talking to God or talking with God for a very long time. But I think as I have progressively grown in my spiritual journey, I am starting to understand prayer from a very different lens. I'm starting to look at prayer from a very different space. And I just felt that it's a conversation we need to have as Christians or as people who are seeking God, not necessarily from a religion perspective, but just from a point of having understood that we need to take our prayers to God. We need to take our thanksgiving and our needs and all these things to God, because he's going to handle them. From that perspective to, I need to have a conversation with God and I need to hear what he's saying to me about this, so that it's an exchange and it's not just me talking to God, but it's also him speaking back to me and letting me know what I need to do. So I have really come a long way in my prayerful journey, guys, and I can tell you for sure, prayer is a very powerful weapon. Prayer is something that we really just need to grasp, because when you are in a constant space of prayer, when you understand prayer as not something you have to do in the morning when you wake up, or at noon, or in the evening when you're going to sleep, or when you're praying for meals, or when you're praying because you've met with family, and you start understanding prayer as something that needs to be a constant in your life, like you constantly need to have conversations with God all throughout your days, all throughout your nights, all throughout, like basically just make it a lifestyle, having a conversation with God every time as a lifestyle and taking that as your prayer life. I'm telling you, the difference you will notice It's going to be great. And I'm going to link this to the prayer of Jabez. If you look at the prayer of Jabez, or Jabez, or how you pronounce his name, the mother of Jabez told him, I called you Jabez because I bore you in pain. And so that referenced who Jabez was supposed to be, or who Jabez was in the mother's life, or generally in his surroundings. But when you look at the prayer of Jabez, he did not he did not define himself as people defined him when he was praying to God. And his prayer was really simple. There was really nothing complicated about Jabez's prayer. And he said, oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territories, that you would hold my hand and keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain. And when I look at Jabez's prayer, or when I look at this, at what he used to tell God, vis-a-vis how he was defined in his own life growing up, I realized that Jabez had reached a point where prayer for him was not a defense mechanism, but prayer for him was boldness. Prayer for him was approaching the King of Throne with boldness, was approaching God not as how people have defined him, but how he perceives God to be in his life. And I think for me, that has got to be the highest form of understanding what prayer is, because I have stopped going to God praying and fighting those who are around me, and fighting the definitions of the things that have defined me all through my life. But I have started going to God. I have started going into prayer with that level of boldness, guys. And let me tell you, I have seen the difference of what that does in my life, because I stopped taking prayer as a space where I always have to constantly go to God and say, oh God, please remove these troubles from my life. Oh God, please bless me with this. Oh God, please, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, And I started going to God. I started taking prayer as a conversation that I need to have with God, a conversation that presents me with an opportunity to just worship Him, an opportunity to just speak with Him, an opportunity to just love on Him, and to pray bold prayers and say, God, oh, that you would bless me indeed, despite my circumstances, despite my everyday life, despite where I have come from, despite my history, despite my qualifications, despite all these things that I think define me. Oh, that Lord, you would bless me indeed. Bless me beyond that. Bless me beyond my thinking, because my thinking is not your thinking. Let me tell you, what we think is nothing close to what God thinks of us. So I stopped limiting my prayers to what I want God to do for me. And I started saying, oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territories. Enlarge those territories you have put for me. Enlarge those territories you have put in my life that you have blessed me with, oh God. Enlarge them to the extent that you know I will be responsible enough to take care of that blessing. And I started having conversations with God, and I still do. I have conversations with God, even in the most of mediocre things, the things you would think, why am I taking this to God in prayer? The things you would be quick to call your friend and be like, oh yeah, hapa kunaenda hivi. I realized that there's something beautiful about taking that conversation to God first, going to God and say, I'm going through this. I feel like this day is really heavy, but I need you to give me a sign. In fact, let me give you guys an example. There's a day I was going to work, and I was just so overwhelmed, and I was not ready to be in that space. I was not ready to go to work, like to be in that work environment, because a lot of things were happening. And I remember when I reached to the basement, I parked my car and I sat there and I said, God, I need you to give me a sign that you are working with me in that office. I need you to give me a sign that I am going to have a beautiful day and that I am going to do well at work. And do you know what happened? Funny enough, I got to the office that day. There was like an Easter bunny kind of thing happening at work, where we had like what are they called, like placing those eggs, not literally eggs but chocolate eggs, around the office, and then if you pick one you get something from it. And I remember when I got into the office, the first thing I did, I was just having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and the first plant I went into, I picked that egg, and that egg had a gift. Like, if you picked one that had a gift, you would get a reward for it. And for me, picking that egg was not just, I didn't take it as it just happened, but I took it as God answering my prayer and telling me, girl, I got you. I got you. You got this. We are in this together, and I am not leaving you one bit. And so for me, everything that happens in my life has been a constant reminder that prayer doesn't have to be a place of going to fight. Prayer doesn't have to be a place of only rushing to God when things seem not to be working out. But when it becomes such a simple relationship, just a simple relationship that you have with God, where you go to him with boldness, but at the same time you go to him with this level of humility where you're saying, I have given it all up to you, and I just need to know that you are here with me. And finding God in those little moments in your life, finding God in those small successes, finding God in those small things that you would probably just think are your day-to-day activities, but finding God in those things and realizing that it's because of the prayers you make, and it's because of the constant conversations and the constant relationship that you're building with God that has actually brought you to that place. So for me, the prayer of Jabez is more than a prayer. It is acknowledging and recognizing God as the overall, like recognizing God above and beyond what is happening in your surroundings, recognizing that you are not defined by what is happening in your surroundings, recognizing that you are not defined by what your parents spoke over you, you are not defined by what your pastor said over you, or what society keeps telling you. You are not defined by that. And when you understand that, let me tell you, and you start praying Jabez's prayer from an angle of enlarge my territories, God, and help me not limit myself from what the world thinks of me, but help me trust that you are taking me where you have called me to be. I can tell you for sure, prayer continues to become a constant in your life, and it stops being an assignment. It stops feeling like another spiritual thing that needs to be on your to-do list as a Christian, another a spiritual thing that you need to be, I don't know, good at. You need to be speaking in tongues. You need to be doing all these things so that your prayer can be powerful. But understanding prayer as a simple conversation that you need to have with God, so that as long as you are in his presence, even when things are not going right, you know that God, you are in this. So I am not worried. I am not shaken, because you will take me out of it. That is going to be a very powerful place for us to be when we start recognizing prayer from that perspective. So that's it for today's conversation, guys. Please allow me to close here, and I hope that you can be able to share with us more on the comment section on what you have been doing to to make your prayer life better, what you have been doing to be consistent, what you have been doing to recognize that it's more than just a to-do list. It's a relationship that you are building every day, and it is something that you have to get to that point where you see it like that, so that it is that in your life. So thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today. If it's your first time here, kama kawaida, karibu sana. Welcome to Make an Impression. This is just a safe space where we are choosing to be authentically bold in how we live our lives, whether that is matters faith, lifestyle, or personal development. So if those are topics that interest you, remember to hit that subscribe button and join this growing community. Thank you guys for tuning in. I am looking forward to seeing you in the next conversation. Until next time, bye.